That's okay. Welcome to our July 1st, 2026 Board of Douglas County Commissioners work session. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, quick note that all work sessions are for informational purposes only. So it's an opportunity for us to receive information, have discussion amongst ourselves with staff and partners. And we will always have a business meeting at 5:30 with general public comment if anybody wishes to come provide public comment about what we discussed today. With that, I believe I'm kicking it over to Sean today. Is that correct?
Yep. Get added panel. All right, I think we'll kind of just kick us off and I'll try to introduce some topics, and we have CFD staff here as well to just kind of start the conversation about the 2027 fiscal year budget for Consolidated Fire District number 1 for Douglas County. As you all know, there's been a lot that's been done in the last couple of years as it relates to just sort of long-term planning and looking at the operational data that supports the efforts of Consolidated Fire District and their staff there. There is a little bit of a question I'll just get out in front of everybody, which is we do need a little bit of guidance as we're preparing the revenue neutral rate for Consolidated. This is a separate rate that is applied just to the district, not the county at large. So that's a different action than what you will be also looking at for just the county generally. So, and that relates specifically to a supplemental request that is included in the agenda that seeks to move staffing up to about 10 additional FTEs. And again, we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's the area of direction we really need. There's a little bit of room here to have some further conversation, but that's kind of kicking us off. So sorry, I'm doing this in Adobe. So just as a reminder, Consolidated Fire District's about 230 square miles, encompasses a lot of unincorporated area, but also the city of Lecompton. I think it's always important to note that that's also a unique area where you've got 2 lakes, especially from a rescue standpoint, and then you have some significant transportation nodes there with I-70, 40, and then K-10 where folks are responding. Across the board, there's 10 stations and 38 apparatus. And again, they're responding to about 1,000 calls annually across that entire district. And right now they're staffed at 6 full-time firefighters. We've got 2 chiefs and then an administrator, and then supplemented with about 45 volunteer personnel. I might kick this over to you all, though, chiefs, just about a little bit about the volunteer model. Again, the bullet points are there, but this becomes a little bit of the question at hand here today, which is that we're seeing, just based off of last year's data, 70% of the calls that have come through have had no volunteer response. That's obviously of concern. Again, gentlemen, I don't want to speak for you as far as all of this, if you want to add any more.
Thank you. That was a surprising statistic to me. I thought it wasn't that big, but the other thing on that is if you get rid of the next 5 most active volunteers, that expands to 80%. Of 1,000 calls per year, I think 75 was the most any of our volunteers responded to. Also, so even the most active volunteers responded to less than 10% of the incidents. Again, those active volunteers are scattered. We have 1 active volunteer in Eudora Township that can respond to EMS. Also, he is the active volunteer and he responds to EMS. The other people that we have their minimal activity and no EMS skills at this point. Clinton Township falls in the same thing, 2 EMS active responders. So has been seen in other volunteer fire departments, the loss of 4 to 5 key volunteers could push our volunteer response incidence above 80%. One of our most active fire responders is David Wolfcool. He's got an injury that we're working through, and now we don't have one of our most active engineers out there. And we've talked about this in the past of what's changing in the volunteer system. And I've been to actually the township board meetings, talking to them. It's a math issue. It's not a character issue. It's just the demands of life, the demands of volunteering, the time it takes on, the different types of calls, the training. And I think Chief Hornberger said it well. And what's changing is people are not shaping their lives around the ability to respond anymore. They're shaping their ability to respond around their lives. And that's a big change from when I started, and some of our volunteers that are, but they're not going to miss kid stuff to go on calls.
Can I ask, I think I know the answer to this, but the two of you also go on a lot of these calls. So you're not listed as these 6 firefighters, you're listed as command staff. How often are you all going on calls 24/7?
Yes. In fact, talking about the sparsity of active, the other night had a call out on Stall Road. 4 patients came in worse than it was, MVA. And I didn't go because I knew the one person that could respond over in Eudora area had come into the station that day and was staffing. So I stayed available just to be able to respond to the east side. And we typically will split that way.
I'll add one of the other issues, and it's highlighted in here as well. One of the other issues is that is overlapping response. So the statistics are in there, but the amount of overlapping calls that we're seeing, and that coupled with our geographical size. So in other words, if we have a call out on 40 Highway towards Big Springs or Stoll or somewhere out in there, and then simultaneously have a call south of Eudora, it stretches us extremely thin as far as that goes. And the other thing I would note as well is just a reminder that those 6 people are 2 per 24-hour shift. So we're responding with 2 people day in and day out across those distances. So it's kind of that time, distance, availability of personnel that really all comes together to where we're at.
And of those 70 to 80% of calls that did not get responded to, approximately, what happens?
So our full-time staff will still handle those calls, but what that does is create larger response times. So where some of our urban counterparts shoot for a sub 5-minute response time, it's very common for me to punch in GPS where I'm going and it say 25 minutes. And that's coming from the stations in South Lawrence. So that's that response time lag that you see. So it was included, the response time, some of the response times were in there. We saw a direct tie and benefit to the additional staffing that you all gave us in Lecompton to start the year. This year, we saw that automatic drop first quarter in response time on the western side of the district. We do still have some parts of the district, the southwest particularly, that it doesn't matter whether you're coming from Lecompton or Lawrence, it's a long ways out there. But so it affects response time is what that does. And then the inverse of the overlapping calls as well is if they just cleared a call, I'll use that example again on the west side, and a secondary call comes out, they're available, but now they're 20 miles away or 15 or 20 miles further away than they would have been. The additional staff in Lecompton has allowed us to move some low acuity calls that can be handled with one or 2 people, to let them handle it. And then the units at Station 111 are not headed that way initially, but it's still the ears up kind of situation where they know that they really don't have help. So if based on call notes or what we hear on the radio, they may
they start to move towards that direction. Yeah.
So that's what I was also going to ask you. Of those 70 to 80% of calls, how many of them are the lower acuity versus some of them that are higher acuity?
We would have to, we didn't pull that data, but we could pull that data. Ballpark, I'm going to guess, estimate probably 30% are low acuity. So it's still a vast majority are serious calls in nature that require more than 1 or 2 responders.
Okay. All right. So more than one responder. And then if you are spread thin across the county, then you are increasing your not delivery, but response times.
Yeah.
And then spreading yourself even thinner.
Yeah, it also affects, especially on the EMS side, it affects patient outcomes. When we talk about certain call types, cardiac in nature, cardiovascular in nature, strokes and that kind of thing, that amount of time is very critical.
So good conversation. I think it kind of gives us an opportunity to reflect back a little bit on, at least, this is a young district, I'll put it that way, in terms of how long it's been since it was established. So really what you're seeing on this screen is just exactly where some of these recommendations are coming from, is that we've gone through and we've done an assessment in the last couple of years with the SCI, which really started to hone in on that data to say, okay, what are the call types? What is the response time? What's your geographical features that are ultimately impacting your service delivery? So with that in mind, we kind of came into last year's budget, as a reminder, with a little bit of a concern with staffing as well as capital needs and a litany of other things. I'll just put it that way. But I think we could all appreciate and understand, and as the chief had mentioned, we did increase staffing at 151 Lecompton Station, and that was a direct response to you all hearing that information, and then ultimately increasing the staff. So through 2026, we've sort of continued this conversation internally, and that was where we established this strategic planning committee that really kind of honed in on some of these subjects, some of these topics, and wanted to go through and dive in a little bit deeper. And again, just as a reminder to that was outcome was the capital improvement plan that you all reviewed that really kind of tried to identify at least what the issues were in terms of apparatus, facilities, equipment, and then try to put together a plan based around that. So we were fortunate, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be deploying a brand new engine. That was, again, just a reflection of the work that has been done, and then ultimately the output of hopefully having a new piece of equipment that is going to result in better outcomes. So as Chief Mathis said too, the 2 FTEs have been added. That was, again, a little bit of a lag time. I just want to be clear on that too, that we do have to onboard people and bring them up to speed. There's been some challenges with just making sure that facilities are adequate to house folks that otherwise have not. We've obviously brought Clint on as well, which has been great. And then as of late, I'll just point out, and it's included in the packet, a little bit of information about just what other jurisdictions are doing. So I do just want to draw attention to that as a supplemental document that's included in the packet. It's just a comparison of a variety of different fire districts that provide either a combination sort of response in terms of volunteer or non-volunteer, and then also just strictly volunteer, and you can kind of see where those numbers are at. Kind of going back to some of the comments that we were going through, this is what you're seeing as a result. So the average response times are starting to come down. And Chiefs, I don't know if you guys want to speak to this in particular, just to color it in a little bit more.
I think it does speak for itself. I will note, and again, this is with data, it's always going to be this way, but you do see a little bit of an uptick in that graph for second quarter. We had a very large number of calls in what we call Division 16, which is that Clinton, Lone Star Lake, the very southwest part of the district. We had a large increase in call numbers from first quarter to second quarter. And again, it doesn't matter whether they're coming from Station 151 or Station 111. That's a long ways. So that uptick is actually directly tied to that call volume increase in the specific area that's the farthest away. But otherwise, we're still seeing call numbers decrease or times decrease, which is what we want.
I got a question. Of the 1,000 calls, roughly, I don't need an exact number, but how many were medical and how many were fire?
We run typically about 50%, 50%. Industry standard is 70% EMS to 30-ish fire. Because of our wildland call volume, it skews that on the fire side. So we run about 50%, 50%. But outside of wildland season, it's probably close again to 60 or 70% are EMS calls.
Does the ambulance usually beat you there before the fire truck can get there?
It depends on which direction we're going to. If we are going toward Eudora with Medic 12 in service and Medic 2 factors into that, they will typically beat us there. If we are pulled down from Lecompton for training or something, then Medic 3 or Medic 4 will beat us there. We meet them a lot of times up in there within minutes of each other because of coming south from Lecompton, going down and towards Stull areas.
So what was presented or provided in your packet is just sort of the framework for the base budget for 2027 as it's sort of been developed up to this point. So just to kind of draw out the main points of it, it's maintaining the current operations as we've kind of laid them out. So we continue to have that 6 firefighter FTE, continue to support the administrative side of things. The fund balance is generally maintained. Continues reserve contributions as a CIP. I do just want to point out that is decreased because again, we are seeing additional costs in other areas as well. In particular, I think health insurance was one that went up a little bit for us. So that is a number I just want to draw attention to because it's different. And then ultimately what isn't in the base budget request is anything to do with any additional staffing. So that's where we kind of flip the page and say this has been one of the strategic priorities that we've been working through is just again this workforce stabilization as we're calling it. No, I won't go through all this again, but this is as a result of a lot of different foundational conversations and documents that sort of support this direction. That again continue to point out staffing as an issue. Yes, Gene.
Is your gas and or diesel purchases totally on the outside, or do you use county facilities?
Split it to a degree. Predominantly is out of the same facilities, the KDOT facilities there next to County Works. So we haven't seen this quarter's impact on fuel cost yet.
But all that is being paid by Consolidated Fire District.
Correct. That we get billed. We get billed for our usage directly. Does not go to county.
So the supplemental requests, again, this is coming on the heels of all those planning documents, suggests a full implementation of staffing, which would be 6 firefighters additional, 3 captains, and then a chief officer. Battalion chief is what was identified. And again, you can read the intended outcomes of that. Again, I'll just say the intended outcomes. It's the hope. But in particular, I just want to point out the firefighter safety aspect of some of this, going back to, again, this district, which is a very vast district that has a lot of complicated features to it, either roadways or waterways. And oftentimes we have one individual that's responding and then hoping that there's going to be other folks showing up. But again, going back to the statistic that, there's only a certain percentage that are showing up based off of 2025 data. But again, just want to draw that connection.
I got a question about the 6 firefighters how tough is it to recruit 6 firefighters, and uh, would you be looking for already trained people, or are you going to have to assume the training burden for all those?
I think first and foremost, we want to make sure we have the funding to hire those individuals. Yeah, I
I'm
know.
just-
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest priority is that we do have we do have some individuals that have come up through the recruit process in the last couple of years that that would fit that bill of somebody who already knows the system and is trained to some extent. It to answer your question, yeah, it's tough to recruit full-time firefighters anywhere, and I think that we have some phenomenal people that we do have. But one of the challenges that we see in hiring someone into the role that we have currently, so the way the world is right now, is that they are going to be potentially alone on calls. Whereas if they go to any other fire department, they don't have to know how to be, the analogy was, they don't have to know how to be the principal. They just have to know how to come in and be the teacher. And that is where we struggle, and that's where we struggle a little bit with recruitment, because they have to be, if we're going to hire somebody on, they've got to have quite a bit of knowledge or be very quick to learn.
Do you have potentially volunteers now that might want to seek this out as a
Potentially.
career?
Have some potentials, some with experience, and some that show a lot of potential, to use words, the same word differently.
The first 6, I mean, the ones that are on board now, that the request of them was that they would be the only person at a station, even the new hires that we have up in Lecompton. This request should be a little bit easier perhaps, because you're asking them to come on and be a part of a team.
Correct.
Correct.
So that, in terms of, as we're talking about like the onboarding process, there's another teacher there. Or
Yes.
perhaps there's already a principal there.
Well, and just to pull on that a little bit more too, that is why there's also the recommendation beyond the 6 firefighters for some of the administrative support that comes with a battalion chief or captains. So if we did hire somebody that maybe is a little green, they would have that support to go in and ultimately, hopefully, become the principal. But
Right.
again,
Absolutely.
we've got to kind of look at it from a succession planning standpoint too. So I just want to kind of clear up that is somewhat of the basis for why you're seeing 10 FTEs here, is to provide that level of support.
And where would the 3 captains come from?
Could be internal. We could open that. We haven't made that determination until we get some direction from you all.
It's a difficult position, even more so because of like I said, you're a mid-level manager, and there are some potential candidates internal. And just with the number and the time to develop, just depends on who we get for applicants.
So for a practical point of view, like if this were approved and you had 6 firefighters, 3 captains, it really would be initially maybe the 9 in the firefighter position, and then bringing people up as captains. I mean,
That's
if you couldn't
potential.
hire someone that already had that skill set, you'd be developing them over a period of time.
Good.
Yeah, and just checking my understanding, but 3 people means 1 24/7 coverage
Correct.
position. So
3 equals 1.
yeah, so 6 firefighters equals 2 new people 24/7.
Right,
And the 3 captains means 1, right? Okay.
Yes, correct.
And right on cue, I think that's, as you can see with the stations, again, Station 111 is a location in Southern Lawrence. The idea there would be from going from that 1 responder to having 3, so 3 over 3 shifts. Same model over in Lecompton. And again, district-wide, what we're looking at there is just additional command and supervising capacity, as well as just community, capacity to respond.
So the city of Lecompton is in the district.
Correct. I hate reading bullet points because you can all kind of read through them yourselves, but Chiefs, I don't know if there's anything here that you guys want to just draw attention to in particular or
I think we've probably hit most of these already. The one that, and it does reflect in our amended our amended budget for the rest of 2026 is some increased overtime costs. Part of that was tied to our ability to train new hires in January, in the beginning of the year. So in other words, we had quite a bit of overtime first quarter. Because again, there's only one, at that time, there's only one person on shift. So that one person was trying to train all of the new hires. And we didn't want to overload one person, so we made that so the 3 shift people became the trainers for those new hires. So we had overtime associated with that. Yeah, other than that, I think we've hit on the vast majority of it. Unless you
I'm
got
going to touch on one point, and it's under the limited leadership growth capacity, but it expands in the training capacity. As a working company, any fire instance, 2 people. And training with just you by yourself is problematic to say the least. And you can't go train and you can't have interdepartmental training because you don't know who's showing up. And the way we interact with our departments, particularly Lawrence, and because of their paid model is we taking the 2 people in there creates a working company that can go to work. And same on a fire scene. Where,
I've got a question about this slide. I kind of zeroed in on the the last bullet point there. The the current staffing, it offers limited capability for community program management. So I think I have maybe a 2-part question there. One, maybe just expand for us, like what does community program management mean to CFD1? What does that look like today, right now? And what kind of capability or capacity would you see? Because we're talking a lot about safety and response time and those real practical logistical things about actually responding to needs and emergencies. But I'm curious to understand some of the non-response oriented stuff and what you think what positive benefits increased capacity for that could have on the department.
address the different community programs is in generic. There's prevention. I'm working with plans review for some of the businesses out in the county, also some residences, public education, recruitment, kind of general overall programs like most fire departments have. But we also, because of other things that go into community risk reduction, some a meeting with the public, like with the state forestry on wildland mitigation, is also getting out and doing target hazard planning, going out to pub eds. Careers on Wheels is something we've done up at Perry LeCompton schools because about half of that district lives south of the river and half north. So it's getting out to our people. There's Casey's going up for something coming up.
It's a community education event. I mean, yeah, we have
Like
things that we
preschoolers.
do as far as that goes, as far as pub eds and we do a lot of those things. We would like to do more. We would like to serve our community in more ways to be a better prepared department. And that's where the administrative side gets stretched pretty thin when we're responding, rotating when we're available for call. Yeah, that type of stuff.
I say like Lieutenant Quigley's going up to the community thing in LeCompton, I think next on the 7th in the morning, I believe, but he'll be coming on overtime because it's not his shift. And just like I said, those are important things. We want to be, we know we're asking for things, but we also, I'm trying to say, we want to show our value to the community and be out there. And we're not just somebody that, well, if you have an emergency, but we're doing more things to make you safer and make our place safer.
Commissioners, we've lost sound. I'm sorry.
That's me, and I accidentally unmuted myself. So is that better, Robin? Maybe.
Yes, thank you.
My apologies, everybody. I guess I'm curious to pull on that thread a little bit more and understand what the direct impact is you see having an additional chief officer. We've talked a lot about the full-time firefighters and the captains, but what about that chief officer is key?
So that position is tied directly to that last bullet point in the previous slide. That allows some of that programmatic coverage to fall into one of those roles, or for some of the tasks that Chief and I are handling, maybe those go to that new chief, and then we take on some of those things. But that is directly tied to that.
And I just, maybe to color it in with another example too, you all just recently had a site plan for a business in the unincorporated area where there was fire suppression that was part of that consideration. So that, again, you heard from Chief Mathis that he's responding to calls 24/7. He's also trying to find time to address those sort of growth considerations that are also going on and balancing that. And again, I think that's just that increased capacity to take on the full kit and caboodle here of what it means to be a fire department. It is a lot. And, I do, because it's just, I have to say it, and it's the 4th of July, a bucket brigade, and just a public education part of that again is the things that hopefully prevent a downstream issue from happening where something could have been avoided with a little bit more of understanding of maybe how to address it on the onset. Same thing with building codes. Again, how can we better integrate Consolidated Fire and all fire districts into the discussion about how we build a community? So
If you hadn't read the county newsletter, the bucket brigade thing might not make a lot of sense. It's, it's about keeping, fireworks from getting out of hand. It's not like turning our fire department back into a bucket brigade.
No,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
Fair enough. There are no horses.
Yeah.
Yes,
I will plug that. We went around, did fireworks stand inspections this morning. And as part of that, we, through a donation from Home Depot, were able to leave buckets with stickers from the State Fire Marshal's office that say Bucket Brigade, with an info sheet about soaking your fireworks after you use them, to not all, but a vast majority of the fireworks stands this morning. So if you see one of the orange Home Depot buckets when you go buy fireworks, pick one up.
The plan review and that kind of other work, to my knowledge, that basically just hasn't existed in rural Douglas County. Would that be fair? Like, there hasn't been capacity with volunteer departments or with CFD. Like, really, that's why I think it felt new when we had that last item come up, is that I don't know that our fire departments had the capacity to do it at all. So that's just another context for what we're talking about.
I think they have been asked for input in the past. Whether or not it was given is a different story.
And I'm gonna add in to that, in this capacity is, I agree, it's fall under state fire codes. And I know there's another agritourism permit coming through that I'm gonna be, Terry Elmer doesn't know it yet, but I'll be coming to bend his ear because he's such a great knowledge base. But just things like that come up and I don't have the knowledge base, and that takes bandwidth. Also, and it just got sent out today, Sean forwarded to me, the state is updating their fire code. And that's capacity that I need to be having it up, as opposed to just across what we're doing and down. That, again, capacity issues.
I had a question for Sean. The city of Lecompton, how does that work? They're in the district, so any mill levy hits all the residents in the city. They don't have any kind of agreement, though. They're just part of the population. Gesundheit.
They're part of, no, their jurisdiction is part of the district. So they are taxed, they were included in it, they are taxed as part of the district.
And
Clarify your question, Commissioner Dorsey. No additional agreements with the city of Lecompton.
Didn't
is
have
what
to.
you're
Just part of
indicating,
it.
because it's just
Doesn't have
on the
to, because
residential
they're a
tax
city
bills.
of the third class and they're able to just join the district. It's on their levy.
So on their mill levy sheet, they would see, you'd have
Gotcha.
Douglas County, the city, and then whatever districts. Yeah.
This may go back 150 years, but why is the county commission the fire board, and why don't we have a representative from Lecompton on the fire board?
So it's in state statute that the way this consolidated district came about, under state statute names, when you consolidate independent districts and township districts, the statute outlines that the Board of County Commissioners is the fire board.
But that only
That's
goes
what I
back to
figured.
2020. It doesn't go back to the founding. I mean, the consolidation was in.
Okay.
Right.
Any other questions? I do just want to obviously point out what's on the screen, which is option A, and I using option loosely here. This is just trying to kind of corral some of these costs and some of these staffing options in a way that hopefully ties back to the intended service impact. But option A, as you see, is staffing additions. So all of these would be additions to the budget. So the 6 full-time firefighters, the additional 3 captains, and 1 chief officer. So you can kind of see where that leads us in terms of the levy impact. Option B is similar. It's adding 6 firefighters, adding 3 captains, but it would defer any chief officer position. So again, same sort of logic there. You can see what we would hope would be the impact and what the levy impact is anticipated to be. Option C is deferring both the 3 captains and the chief officer and only hiring or adding those 6 firefighter positions. So I'll pause here if there's any questions.
So I know we have a letter from the city of Lecompton, but Chief Mathis, you've done quite a bit of outreach with the townships and folks within this district. Can you talk about reactions?
Yes, ma'am. I've met with Eudora Township, Lecompton Township, Lecompton City, and Wakarusa Township. Kanwaka had rearranged their meeting and talked about, hey, we've talked about station long-term and just deferring that discussion is just laid down the road, but the staffing has been a critical thing and talking about the practical issues we're running into. And I've gotten, I don't know if generally positive, but I haven't gotten any negative reactions because it's just the practicality of the needing people to serve and respond to their areas. So, and my goal is to go back around to them again, but I've hit all of them except for Clinton that we serve.
And just really quickly, just so I don't forget, the Consolidated Fire did look at other supplemental requests. So there was discussions about what to do with future stations and whether or not we need to start to kind of build up the capacity to take that on. As you recall from the CIP, that is not fully funded. So there's a question about how can we long-term sustain that capital improvement plan, or do we make adjustments to what's being deferred within that? So I just want to be really clear that as you're sort of looking at these options, this solves one of a couple legs of this stool in terms of what ultimately we think and what's been supported through these planning efforts, improvements to this service.
That was like a perfect tee up for my question, Sean. Thank you. Yeah, I think I want to just get a sense from you all about what if you feel like the infrastructure of the department as it exists right now supports 9 to 10 additional staff being able to, between the stations and the facilities as they are, the the current staffing and administrative capacity to do the training and recruitment, which is always a lot more time and work invested up front for hopefully good return on investment, certainly. But yeah, I'm curious to just hear you all talk about your confidence that sort of the other pieces, as a little wobbly as they may be, how strong do those things feel to support this additional staffing?
I think we're fully able to absorb the full option that we presented. So option A, that we are stable. We have the ability, we have the capacity. Stations are able to staff that capacity. As we look to the future, that's when we'll start to have conversations about how stations and staffing become paralleled with one another. Because the other existing stations, or if we try to put another station staffed, that's where we'll have to have those conversations where we don't have other stations that are capable of being staffed at this time. So,
and the great unknown being who applies, who's interested. But we've already, Chief Hornberg and I are already talking about working with Lieutenant Cavisto, who's not the recruit trainer, but the training manager, about taking from this last onboarding and how do we improve it and make it better and tailor it for more people involved, and how that looks, the staffing of it, which in the overtime. But we've already started having discussions on how would we do this onboarding. So
thanks. One other question that's sort of been bumping around in my head is, and just thinking about the uniqueness of this geographic district and many of the things that have been talked about and pointed out in this packet as sort of regional comparison, and the lower density population spread out over such a big geographic range, the two lakes, as you mentioned, lots of wildlands. So I guess I don't know exactly what my question is here, so just bear with me and give me whatever thoughts you have. I'm kind of trying to unpack, like, how big is the impact going to be felt for the residents spread across the geographic region, the district, and how much could, if we're talking about option A, what the supplemental request is, like, how much commercial property is there throughout the district that really helps bolster that? Do we have a sense of how that compares? I mean, it's not necessarily a decision factor for me, but I am kind of just trying to wrap my brain around how that impact is spread. We have some good examples of the $300,000 and $500,000 home. When we think about commercial properties, that's a much bigger impact.
correct. And currently our ISO rating, which is insurance, which depends on who you ask, what it matters, but it is what somebody pays every year in insurance, is a 5. And below about a 7 is a benefit. Does not affect residences, but it affects businesses. And being able to keep that staffing directly ties in the ability to do that. Response times ties in that. There's a worksheet for it, water supply, dispatch factors in it. Training's a big part of it also. And earlier, the threats to the system. Right now, a 2-person response dumps our system. You need a second person on a lift assist up north or down south. The system's now at its breaking point. I don't know if I addressed all but some of the other, and the staffing, what it also does is, because of those times, it's 20 minutes, 25 minutes, basically east to west borders. It's about 20 minutes to like Four Corners, but to the Clinton Peninsula turnoff from both stations. They're within 2 or 3 minutes of each other, but
that helps. And I guess just to pull in the thread a little bit, since you mentioned the ISO rating, and we didn't talk about that explicitly here, but we have in the past, do you all have concerns about that slipping in the relatively near future and therefore impacting a variety of things, including commercial business and insurance?
So ISO has changed some of their formulas just a little bit, especially as of late. So it will be interesting to see what they come back with. But based on how they've operated in the past and how they've evaluated departments in the past, With the additional staffing, I see absolutely no reason why we don't improve. Especially when we start to look at the decrease in call response time, in training hours, because those are cumulative, and some other impacts that we're already feeling. And the other thing with ISO, as Chief mentioned, below a 7 doesn't really affect residential until you hit a 4. And then residential will start to see an impact and a benefit. So we're right there close right now. And the goal is to get lower.
And one thing I'm directly working, well, through a third party insurance is a residence that their insurance is their insurance is skyrocketing. I don't know exactly why. I've been working back and forth with them because keeping your insurance increase is a de facto tax. It's a yearly cost on your household that's important to me that we do the things to keep that from happening. And I don't know if quite in your question, but comparable issues, comparable departments we looked at. We tend to look at Shawnee Heights because our closest neighbor. And I'll ask you to help with some numbers. They're about half the size, not quite. They run with 21 FTEs. They have 3 stations staffed with, I can't remember, 7 per shift, and their mill levy is 16. They do have some businesses in there, but in the additional information that was submitted, and I believe it's in the packet showing the comparables, it shows where we fall in across and multiple departments across the state. We tend to be a unique entity, and I know we're getting near toward the time, so we have to have some discussion. We tend to be unique because of our size, but where the other
we truly are one of a kind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was just going to point out that,
Yeah.
I mean, Shawnee Heights District is geographically much more
They're-
condensed, and then a denser
so they're
population.
half the square miles roughly with
Yeah.
about the same population, so they're geographically more dense. There's some others that are in there that, they have 1 station or 2 stations. If you think about that that means they have probably 5 to 6 apparatus that they manage. We have almost 40. So our overhead is a lot higher in some of those areas where they're shifting funding to staffing because they have lower overhead in other areas than we do. So we truly are one of a kind in the state.
Does make it hard to do apples to apples.
It does. It very
Mhm.
much does.
One more question for now, and I'll turn it over to other commissioners. I think I'm wondering about all of the public lands. I mean, specifically Clinton Lake, and so the state park and the Army Corps. And I'm just curious, can you all speak to us about if there's anything for us to know about whether or not there's any compensation, payment in lieu of taxes
That
from the
would be
federal
phenomenal.
government?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Are those things that you are aware? I mean, I'm aware of like payment in lieu of taxes for federal public lands. And it's generally like national parks and like Bureau of Public Lands. But so I don't know that it would translate to, or I don't know that it's the same with Army Corps of Engineer, and it's a relatively small geographic area for federal lands. But I'm just, thinking about what a large geographic area that is, how it complicates response times in general, and that's a public recreation area. You're responding to calls there that are happening for people that are at least many of them, some of them are not tax rate payers for this district.
Absolutely.
absolutely generate calls. There are some grants kind of obscure. They're tied if you have federal lands, but it's not. Other than that, it's like KU. It generates no tax base, but creates call volume.
I do
Good
want,
point, Chief.
yeah, I do want to point out, and the chief just kind of mentioned it, that, being unique isn't a bad thing. In the context of I think your question, which is, because we have these assets, that does allow us to be a little bit more compelling when we do try to seek out grants. Having a department that is broadly leveraged again, is a good thing when we start to write some of those grants. I think I would point back to very quickly who's doing that work. Because as you've heard, again, just this administrative side of this is difficult to do when you're also acting as a firefighter. And again, just I think it's good to look at those things and say, how can we leverage it? So I don't want to lose sight of maybe being a bit curious in that space, just to say maybe there is an opportunity. But to answer it directly, we are not being directly compensated for any of those any of those things.
So that was one of the questions I was going to ask is, has the team taken a look at some of the like SAFER grants, the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grants, or the assistance to firefighter grants? FEMA, they also have a fire prevention and safety grant. So it does look like there are some grants out there that CFD1 could qualify for equipment, PPE, SCBA, or apparatus. The fire prevention and safety grants are specific for training and community education. So something that you've specifically called out. The SAFER grant does look like Shawnee Heights County Fire and EMS has previously applied. I couldn't see if they've actually been granted that. Unfortunately, that period just closed on June 21st. So I'm not sure if that's something that you've looked at, but in the future, if you do have, maybe you're going to say that you applied.
That was for the 2025 year because of the government shutdown. The 2026 fiscal year will be opening back up later this year.
Okay, fantastic. So maybe that's something that you're going to apply for or take a look at applying to?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. Okay. Because that does look like that is a 3-year cycle. So maybe that'll be a decent amount of money because that does look like it funds firefighter positions. So maybe that could fund some of the
The
positions.
SAFER grant is a little bit weird in that you all would have to approve the funding for those positions, even though the grant would pick up, and it decreases annually. So the first year it's 100%, the next year, and they change it all every grant cycle, but it roughly 100%, 60%, 30% is what they cover. And then the district has a responsibility not to just let those people go at the end of that 3-year cycle. But it does get a little weird because you have to approve it, but we can't hire them or say that we're going to hire them. It can be done, and it's something we will look into, and especially as we look at some of our capital needs for apparatus, for equipment, that's where we're going to lean into the AFG grants for the 2026 year.
I think those AFGs, that's kind of what I'm alluding to with some of these assets that we have. Those are things that we can put into an application that, again, is a little more compelling than just we don't have the money to do something. We can tie it back to, okay, what's the cause and effect? I do just want to point out with personnel grants, this is my favorite federal grant term is supplant. There is some consideration in that we cannot supplant funding. So you're basically, as the chief mentioned, you're agreeing to pick up the tab after year 5 is usually what the timeline is to say, okay, it's 100% year 1, it'll drop to 80 and so on and so on and so on. But year 5 or year 6 rather, you're taking on that responsibility. So it extends the runway a little bit. But that is, I think, part of this conversation when you're looking at options is to say, okay, could we hold off on something and then hopefully we get awarded funding? But again, you're kind of putting that in the hands of the federal government to continue that program, and then also to be awarded, it is very competitive.
And then I'm also curious too if anyone has had any conversations with our partners that have been awarded the Rural Health Transformation dollars. So there might be some pockets of money within those geographic areas and some unique opportunities to kind of think outside of the box and partner with them just to ideate and just see if there are any opportunities as we think about emergency response, unique health opportunities within some of those rural geography areas. because that is also long-term, and they will receive those dollars for several years. And if those dollars are not spent, they will be clawed back.
I don't have a question. I was just listening to Commissioner Reed talk about payment in lieu of taxes. And according to the U.S. Department of Interior, Douglas County received $72,000 from them for federal lands of payment in lieu of taxes in 2026. So I don't know how that fits into our budget, but I was just curious if that happened, and I was able to find it.
Brooke can come to
sounds
the
like he
podium
might
and
know.
tell us about that.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the payment in lieu of taxes that we do receive from the Department of the Interior. Those are distributed amongst 2 or 3 school districts and then the townships. So the rural fire districts do not realize any revenue from that particular payment. I was just looking at, we just got our letter today about that $72,000. So I was looking at it when I was sitting in the audience there. So.
And maybe Brooke speaks to this too, but I believe within this district, as far as non-residential payers, Berry Plastics and the Lawrence Energy Center also pay into that district, right?
Two worthwhile commercially taxed or utility taxed entities in the district. Commissioners, we're running up on 5 o'clock, and I want to leave some space for obviously further questions, but also reactions to these sort of 3 options, at least, loosely corralled, as Sean said, and stop sharing the screen, but we all have the information in front of us, and the direction requested is to just try and determine if we want to move forward with preserving the ability to evaluate option A, B, or C, so up to a 4.1 mil levy for the revenue neutral rate hearing that we'll be having soon, where we will then have some more opportunity to talk about what we specifically set that rate at. But yeah, just curious to hear reactions and of course, any additional questions from commissioners.
So I had the opportunity to talk to council members for the City of Lecompton City Council about the letter specifically. And I wasn't able to be at that meeting. I had another meeting at that time, but I said, so was this a unanimous discussion, or were there, of varying opinions? And they said, yes, it was a unanimous decision to offer that letter of support. And I just thought that was worth noting, I think, for the conversation. I don't know that, the letter doesn't tie specifically to a mill levy value. So I don't know if you got to that level of discussion with them about, it's always like, would you like more service? Yes, we'd like more service. Will you be willing to pay more? They've said yes to that, but what's the scope of the conversation in terms of what they were talking about paying? Because there's some big numbers here.
They were one of my first ones, and they proffered that letter. We did not ask for it. I got in the ballpark of the 4 mills, but we didn't have our valuations in yet. So I didn't know specific numbers. We knew, and I said it's going to be a significant 3 to 4 mil hike, but we just didn't have our evaluations yet. After the evaluations came in, I did talk to the townships and specifically mentioned with that 10, it was a 4 mil increase. Did that come across on here?
That I heard you, but I'm sitting across from you. That matters to me. I'm glad to hear that, it wasn't just because anytime we talk to constituents about, do you want this additional service? Yes. Do you want to pay for it? That's another question. So I'm glad that was kind of both parts of that conversation were being had. Appreciate it.
I would say, commissioners, as we move into our budget deliberations, we've tentatively set aside that Friday morning, July 10th. We will have finished hearings, and that might be an opportunity to revisit this conversation and provide that direction that we could then include on our agenda for July 15th, which is when we will be passing our revenue neutral rate resolutions. That's the important step that has to happen in there. So I think we can give you some time to think and deliberate like we do with other budget hearings, and then come back on the 10th and provide some direction for what we put on the agenda for the 15th.
I guess philosophically, as a county, a county budget, we've tended to go ahead and decide on what that mill levy is and publish that, as opposed to, I know that City of Lawrence sometimes will publish like a maybe, a cap, or we might go to this. We haven't typically done that. We have that option here. But I think that maybe, having an opportunity to come back and talk again on the 10th lets us kind of think about that and make a decision on whether we need to have budget hammered out and put an actual mill levy out there to the public, or if we are kind of leaving some space open for that conversation, and then would maybe look at something lower than that cap.
Because I would say if we did decide to go with that route of let's just go with a higher amount and see how we feel, I'm going to need direction sometime between July 20th and probably sooner towards that date than August 26th from this commission for what we would publish in terms of our public hearing, because then you vote on it on the 26th of August. So sometime between that, but maybe we will be at consensus on July 10th. That's my distinct hope.
I guess that's my comfort level, is if we can publish what we mean,
Yes.
as opposed to just what might happen. But that's a conversation for all commissioners.
To summarize, if in a perfect world, I presume you would want all 10 people on January 1st. Is that right? Fully trained, of course.
In a perfect world, yes, that would be phenomenal to have all 10 come on January 1st, hit the ground running, and we'd be running like a sewing machine.
So my question is that the different options have different mill levies. So realistically, how long is it going to take to onboard? My concern is I don't want to charge mill levy for people that realistically you're not going to get hired till 2028, if you will.
Oh, it wouldn't be that long. The one discussion that we've had internally is potentially hiring the 6 and then the 3 captains and the chief, kind of all, so the 4 at the same time. That would allow for internal candidates for captains positions and or external. And then same for the additional chief's position. But that was kind of our stair step, was we bring on the 6 and then we go from there.
So you think that would take
6 months?
4 months, 6 months?
6 months.
And I'd say any savings that happens in that 4 to 6 months, their equipment reserve and reserve balances are uncomfortably low, in my opinion. So any extra revenue from that could go to bolster that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I was going to make that point also, and that it's really just this first year. If we were to increase 4.1 mils, it would just be this first year that there could be some reserve dollars achieved from that before it's fully utilized and you all are a fully staffed department moving forward. I will share, first share that I tend to agree with you, Commissioner Willie, and I would prefer that if possible, when we're revisiting this on the 10th and during our budget deliberations, that we as a commission feel firm about what mill we would like to increase that and plan for that. Excuse me. And for me, given all the information in the packet and all the diligent, I think, strategizing around how to prioritize what the next best step is to really stabilize this department and make it so that there's a really strong foundation to keep building on the other growth opportunities and the other strategies identified, is to take the jump and go with option A, because I mean, everything I've heard, I for me, option B is out because it's too insignificant of a difference between the two. And if we're gonna, hire 9 more folks, then let's have that chief officer for the benefit of having a really fully rounded out administrative and public programming opportunities too. So I'm personally supportive of it and leaning towards this idea that we really stabilize with that 4.1 mils, and the idea of limping you all along with starting at option C and just giving you 6 firefighters without additional leadership capacity. that feels like it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, frankly. And while it's approximately half the cost per resident or per taxpayer in the district, I think that the significant increase in services and capacity built that will allow you to really have more of a foundation and not feel like you're limping along too much and kind of making it work still, it is worthwhile to me. Also, raising people's taxes in 1 year versus 2 years back to back. Because if we were to go with option C, as I see it, how long is it before we're having this conversation about how to get those other 4 staff and the increased capacity? And then we're talking to everybody about a tax increase again. So practically speaking, 1 year of that in the near future that really stabilizes makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that there's a lot of compelling data and reasons behind it.
So I think there's no doubt of the need for all of the positions you've asked for, no doubt whatsoever. And that right now, what our status quo is to have, stations, whole stations that are staffed with one individual and that they're asked to respond alone is, I recognize it was a leap to get here. It's also, we just can't lose track. Like that is an inappropriate ask of anyone safety wise. It is a dangerous situation. We're still glad to have, because we had nobody in Lecompton except an 8-hour shift in a day. So there's, when we have the discussion about our city response in the city of Lawrence, it's how many people on a truck, and their minimum that was ever talked about is more than we're talking about here for one truck. So there's no doubt of the need. I do think that this time between when we have this discussion and then the July 10th gives the community a good opportunity to respond to this request and gives us more information and more input on it. We know the need is there. What's the capacity and interest in paying for that need within that district? I've heard from my constituents that are not within CFD that there's still some misunderstanding about who this applies to. Is this part of Lawrence taxes? It isn't. Is this part of Baldwin taxes? It isn't. This just this northern half of rural Douglas County, roughly. So I just think this gives us an opportunity to have further conversations. So I'm glad that we're not kind of being pushed for that decision tonight. But I'm glad to hear from other commissioners about kind of where people might be leaning, because that helps us have that conversation broader in the community.
As you're thinking too, just going back to the July 10th, there we go. Got too high on me. If there's anything that we can refine and provide a little bit more context, we'd love to hear that so that we can come to that July 10th meeting prepared. So again, if option A, B, C, if any of those feel uncomfortable and we don't want to talk about it anymore, that's direction. If there's something more that we want to just dive in and talk about option A, again, I think we have a little bit of refinement to do in the budget anyway. So I want to kind of give some space for that.
Do you have a map of where all the calls are?
We've had them in the past. I don't have one with me. Yeah.
I think it's important to weigh in. I will say, while I take an oath for Douglas County, this taxing district is outside of my district. So I really listen closely to my colleagues here on the commission to understand where those levels might be. What's the balance between, as Commissioner Willie said, the very necessary service and then the tax implications that go with that service. So I'm interested to hear from all my colleagues and sort of to determine as we get to the 10th.
Thoughts, commissioners? Burning questions or requests for staff to give us some more refined information between now and next Friday?
I think the need is great. And I also think that there are opportunities for us to look at grants and see what other types of support that we can bring in for some of the additional opportunities that you're taking a look at, whether it be training and community engagement, and or as we look towards years ahead, if there are opportunities for grant matching for staffing positions or apparatus, let's take a look at what other resource opportunities might be hanging out there that we can leverage. Because we never know what we can bring in that can complement the work that you are all doing to lessen the burden. And so if we can do that to complement your budget, then let's see what those opportunities look like. And then on top of that, if you could, as you are looking at data, let's see if we can also take a look at the low and the high acuity. Okay, thank you so much.
And although I recognize I didn't have a very clear question in here, I'm going to look at you, Sean, in particular. I would welcome any feedback or additional information you think might be helpful to help paint a picture about the commercial taxpayers that are in the district, how that compares to the residential.
And I put that down as well, as I think we can go through and just make sure that you're clear about what the tax mix is there. That's a pretty simple thing that we can throw together. And I think that will help color it in a little bit. I think part of that conversation too is as the unincorporated area becomes less and less. I mean, just to color it in a little bit more, is if annexations continue, that is a direct threat to Consolidated Fire District and their tax base. So I think that's an important nuance to this discussion, is that's a reality that expansions of municipalities, cities does cause some future considerations for Consolidated Fire District. So.
I don't know that threat is the right framework for that. It's a change. And it's something like, as future discussions are talking about where stations should be, what stations, are no longer needed, or how to reallocate that. Those are the conversations that come with it. It's just a change.
Chiefs, do you have what you need from us for today?
I do not. Thank you all for your time.
All right. With that, we are recessed until our 5:30 business meeting.